Hey folks, Jack Wilkie here at the start of a new year and a new project I'm kind of launching this year. That is some book reviews. Before I get into it though, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Obviously I do most of my work on the Focus Press channel, but I'm trying to get the numbers up on this one as well. I want to thank everybody who helped get me over 100. That was a big help, helps me put up longer videos, do a custom URL so I'm easier to find on YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate everyone who did that. So if you're watching right now, please click the like button and make sure you're subscribed to this channel, as I'll be putting up more things like this as the year goes on. As I mentioned, book reviews is one of the things I want to do. One of my aims for this year, I'm not going to call it a goal, I didn't put a number on it, but one of my aims is to do more reading. Life's been a little busy, work's been a little busy over the last couple of years, and I've fallen behind on that. But so since I do so much writing, the better reader you are, the better writer you are. And one of the ones I got it for Christmas actually, so shout out to my mom for the Christmas gift, was Charlie Kirk's Stop in the Name of God, a book on, well, I'll just read the subtitle, Why Honoring the Sabbath Will Transform Your Life. I posted about that on Facebook, said that I was excited to read it, and was a little bit surprised at some of the pushback. That word Sabbath seemed to kind of get people's attention and not necessarily in a good way. And so I wanted to read the book before I really put out a lot of commentary on it, on my thoughts. So what I'm going to do is review the book for the book itself, share some quotes that I thought were very valuable and useful, and explain a little bit, I don't want to give the whole thing away, but Charlie's view on it. And then the second half of this video, I want to share what I've taken from it, what I was already doing before, some principles, some considerations for you, I guess, as we consider this idea of the Sabbath. So before I get into some of the nuts and bolts of the book and what I thought of it, it's important to define what the book itself means by Sabbath. Charlie Kirk is not, in the book, did not make the case for observing the Sabbath according to the old law. He was not being Pharisaical. He was not bringing back all of those things that, of course, Jesus was called on by the Pharisees or any of those things. He's using it very much as a general principle of rest, of taking one day a week off and just catching our breath. He talks about how, whether you're religious or not, this was part of creation for us to, every 7 days, need to take a break. And really, when he says rest, one of the biggest thrusts of the entire thing is a rest from our phones, from the screens, from just the constant being in front of our work, being connected to our email, to texts, to social media, to things like that. That is, when he says Sabbath, that is the biggest takeaway. It's not the only one, but it's the biggest takeaway, is getting away from our phones. When I get to my part of it here at the end and talk about what I've observed, I'm going to expand on that a little bit, on some things I think we can add. But the point here is not to put us back under the Mosaic Law. I know there are people who have kind of gone that direction. There are the Torah observant Christians who think that's what we're supposed to do, is when we become Christians, start observing all the law. I don't agree with that. In fact, there's a chapter in the book that makes the case for Christians need to do this, and a case against it. He quotes famous theologians on both sides, and so he does a very fair hearing. And so that's one of the things I appreciate about it, is he kind of gives the full-orbed view of whether or not this idea of the Sabbath is applicable, is needed for Christians today or not. And so really it's just that idea of a day of rest. He says in there he does not quibble between whether you take it on Saturday or Sunday. And so when he says Sabbath, a lot of people say, well, that means Saturday, that means the law of Moses. Most technically, but even before the Ten Commandments, they were given a Sabbath there in the wilderness about collecting manna on the seventh day. And of course, it's rooted in creation and all of that. So Sabbath itself, according to the book, is not a strict legal adherence to the Mosaic Law. And again, it's Saturday and or Sunday, a day of rest, not necessarily that one Saturday. But with that, a more, I guess, traditional review. I'll get to the negatives first. First, it's not... It's a book kind of written to be a New York Times bestseller kind of book, and that is just a different kind of book. I'm used to reading pretty theologically niche books that very much, are very specific and to the point, and so they can kind of get to the point assuming you already know things. This book takes a whole chapter out establishing the existence of God. Well, you're able to skim over that pretty quickly if you know those arguments as far as how we know there is a God, There's a chapter in there about gods that people turn to when they don't have God, and of course he was obviously a prominent conservative commentator, and so he spends a lot of time on that, on things like climate change and other causes that people have turned into their God. And again, not really making the case for the Sabbath in those. I think you can skim through those pretty quickly, but again, it kind of has that, I don't know, broad, covers a lot of topics, covers a lot of talking points thing that some of those books that are written more for the bestseller kind of publications I do a little bit differently than some of the other theological books you might be used to reading. So that was a negative. Another negative is it's fairly repetitive. It comes back around to the same points a lot. It makes good points, but it says them again. I saw one person make the claim they believed that this book had a lot of AI used in it, and I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how much of it Charlie was able to finish before before he was murdered, unfortunately, and everything that went down last year. And so there are some things in there where it does look like they kind of had to fill in some of the blanks that were, again, so that led to some of the repetitiveness, some of the sentences that you kind of notice coming back around a few different times in the book. And so it's not the best written book you're ever going to read. And so I'll say that right up front that, I've read better books. However, getting to the point of the idea of Sabbath, there's a lot of great points that he makes there about how we're raging against God, how when we got rid of a day of rest, whether it's the Sunday day of rest, the Saturday day of rest, whatever it may be, that it turned us into slaves to productivity rather than servants of God. That the Sabbath really was about from the slave all the way up to the king. Everybody had to stop, and it's a great equalizer of humanity. And we've gotten away from that. He talks about how godless regimes throughout history have tried to remove the idea of even a 7-day week, but especially a day of rest, a day of worship, all those kinds of things. And so it's very valuable to establish kind of what used to be done, what has been done against it, how we got away from it, what it has cost us in all of those things. And so, again, I think he makes the case very well of the importance of rest, of how overworked and overstimulated, I guess, would be one thing that we are. And so that's one very valuable thing about the book that I think nobody disagrees with that. And he kind of makes that point that, look, everyone knows, it's kind of like a smoker. Everyone knows, yeah, I'm probably doing some damage here, yet we just don't stop. With our constant connectedness, our fear of missing out, our need to have some kind of entertainment on at all times, our inability to be silent. And so, again, all very good points. Then he makes the case, of course, for taking a day of rest. He answers objections. I think he does a really good job of that. And I mentioned I'm going to get to some of the quotes here. And with that, we'll start with the quotes that kind of establish the need for a day of rest. He said, "We're more productive and less peaceful, more connected digitally and more isolated relationally. We are overstimulated, undernourished, distracted, discontent, and desperately lonely. We are in many ways a Sabbathless people, wandering, overworked, and longing without even knowing for what." If that doesn't resonate with you, I don't know what world you're living in. The overstimulated, distracted, discontent, that's just life right now. And he's right. And so to diagnose that as Sabbathless, and he talks about how the Sabbath gives structure. It adds holiness to our week. When you have one day a week where you're saying, stop, that's good. And there's a section in the conclusion where he brings up AI and just dealing with how this is all going to get worse. It's getting more and more customized to keep us more and more plugged into the system, to keep our kids, our families, to keep us apart from each other and our churches. And he said, this is our way of saying enough. This day doesn't belong to you. And I think that's really powerful. Answering where people look at it, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on this here in a minute, but the idea of, we hear Sabbath, we hear old law, and people immediately just start going, hey, no, whoa, no, we don't do that anymore. Jesus got rid of that. We don't have to. I really like that he made this point. The Sabbath was not a denial of joy. It was an invitation to deeper joy. There is a real problem here with how we view the law itself. I'm glad we can have bacon wrapped shrimp. I'm glad we don't have cleanliness laws and things like that keep us out of worship and things like that. On the other hand, the law itself, boy, sometimes we talk about it like, wow, what a heavy burden and how awful it was and all that. Well, I'm glad we're under the new covenant. It's so much better in Christ, and the sacrificial system of he was taken it, paid it once for all. All of those things are great, but the law is also the thing that led to Psalm 119. 176 verses of how great God's law is and how much it educates us and helps us and leads us and guides us, and every command God gave was for their good, including a day of rest. There's a reason God took a day of rest to set an example for us, and I think that's an important thing for us to realize. He makes this point a few times. As I said, it's a little repetitive, but it's a powerful one when he compares the first giving of the law, and it says you're going to rest because God took that seventh day of rest, to Deuteronomy, when they're going to go into the promised land. It changes it up and says, because God gave you rest from Pharaoh. And so here, this quote, he says, in Exodus, you Sabbath because God made the world. In Deuteronomy, you Sabbath because God set you free. What's the implication? Slaves don't rest, only the free do. That's a really great thought, that it is in our enslavement to tech, our enslavement to productivity, our enslavement to the need to feel like we're producing with our time at all times. That's a slave mindset, and being able to shut it off and say, you know what? I'm going to relax. I'm going to worship God. I'm going to read my Bible and pray a little more. I'm going to enjoy my family and some good food and all of those things. Yeah, that's really important. And so it is a freedom from slavery. It's a freedom to reconnect with God. And this is the part I think is these last two quotes especially are particularly what was my favorite part about the book. Something I think we all need to do well. It's something that if you followed me, whether through Think Deeper podcast or my writing, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. It's one of my biggest points is there are matters of wisdom. Everything is not, do we have to, do we not have to? Well, is there a command? Well, we don't have to keep the... Okay, but is it good to take a day of rest? And that's the question here. And so he says, whether you believe you are bound to the Sabbath or not is not the point. It's a self-evident truth that if every church and Christian community turned off from the world for a day, they would arise after 24 hours better rested and prepared and stronger to defend the faith the following week. So again, he says, look, he kind of sidesteps the debate. He lays out the case for both. Yes, we need to. Yes, we don't have to. But aside from all that, yeah, it's a good thing to do. As I said, this is one of my biggest points, and I always like pointing to the end of Hebrews 5 and where he goes into Hebrews 6 to saying, look, you're still on milk. You need meat. You need to become mature so you can discern what is good and evil. The maturity is having discernment. If it's all a list of do's and don't do's and that's all we have to ever do, then you don't need discernment. That's not what discernment is. That's not how discernment works. Discernment is, as Paul says in, I believe it's in Ephesians, striving to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. One of my favorite phrases as well. You don't have to strive to learn if it's just a list of do's and don'ts. Striving to learn is going, hey, maybe a day off from my phone would draw me closer to God. Let me give it a try. I want to do that, and maybe it doesn't do that for me, and okay, I tried it and it didn't. Give it a try, but immediately you get people, well, hey, that's legalism. This other quote I think helps as well. Nowhere in this book am I calling you to legalism. The goal isn't a rigid formula, it's a reordered life. I'm not trying to burden you with guilt, I'm trying to provoke you to hunger. So lest anyone get the wrong idea when you see this, there's nothing in this book that says, all right, you can't turn your TV on, you can't make coffee on the Sabbath, you can't turn the electricity on, you can't drive a car, you can't go a certain distance, any of those things. It's take a day of rest. In fact, he's so undogmatic at one point, he talks about that if he would take his on Saturdays, and he says if I just cannot take the Saturday off, I push it to Sunday. If I can't take the Saturday off and I have to travel home on Sunday, I push it to the next week and I take 2 days off. It's about this pattern of rest in your life and getting away from the hustle and bustle, taking time with God and family and those kinds of things, having people over and sharing a meal, whatever it may be. That's the point. And so I love this quote. He says, I'm not trying to burden you with guilt. There's not this sense of, oh no, what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? It's just chill out for a day. Just turn the phone off or at least set it aside, check on it every few hours rather than keep it in your pocket. Again, get your Bible out, get a journal, and he gives some really good practical tips as well. And so I think this is really important for us to look at something like this and go, I think some people see the title of this book and go, well, we don't have to do that, so I'm not interested. I'm just going to plug my ears. I don't. wisdom. Just your wisdom might lead you to say, I don't need this to be closer to God. Your wisdom might say, you know what, this actually does help. Those are the kind of discussions we need to have and not just get stuck in that cycle. And so that's just a few of my favorite quotes from it that I think commend the book. I'll put a link here in the description where you can grab it on Amazon. Apparently it was popular enough that a lot of people have had a hard time getting a hold of it, and somehow my mom got in under the bar and got in before they were back ordered, so I appreciate her for that Christmas gift she got me. There's always books on a preacher's Christmas list, and this was one of them for me. So, again, I recommend the book. As I said, not the best written book I've ever read, but a lot to think about there, a lot of good material. As I said, maybe some chapters you can skim and get through it a little bit more quickly if you're familiar with that material, but certainly check it out. As I said, though, the second half of this, I want to talk about what I've done, what I've learned, how I've implemented it. Before all this, and I'll link this as well in the notes, I did an article a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, about the Chick-fil-A model and making the case that Christians should, to the best of our ability, stay out of businesses on Sunday. And so I did that. I don't go out to eat on Sunday. I really, and to the best of my ability, don't go into the grocery store. There was a time where we had forgotten to get anything for the church fellowship meal, so we swung through there. And so again, it's not a legalistic, dogmatic, oh no, I sinned by going in there, but it's I'm trying not to do that. Well, why? Well, everyone agrees it's great that Chick-fil-A takes the day off, lets their people go home, lets their employees have the day off from work to go worship if that's what they want to do. Everyone agrees most everyone agrees it was great when society did that, where we shut down a little bit more on Sunday. The only way that we can really incentivize that to happen is if more Christians joined in on that and said, you know what, if I don't want the Chick-fil-A, if I think it's good that the Chick-fil-A workers aren't working for me on Sunday, I maybe won't make the McDonald's workers work for me on Sunday. And again, just societally really endorsing Sunday as a day of rest. Interestingly, in the book, Charlie talked about the blue laws and the days of towns shutting down, but he wasn't so much making the case for that, wasn't making the case for shutting down. I am a big believer in that. I think it's been a good thing for me and my family. There's, again, a few unavoidable times, and obviously there's always some businesses that are going to need to stay open. The hospital can't take the day off from there, but in general, I do think it's a good practice for Christians to give a try. And again, if all of us did that, everyone would take the day off. Everyone would have Sunday off. Does that mean they would all come flocking to church? No, I don't believe that, but I think some would. I think it would, hey, there's nothing to do. Let's go see what's going on at church. And so I certainly recommend that practice. With that, I kind of realized, okay, I'm not going to the restaurant. I come home and turn on NFL football. Not very consistent, so I'm trying to get away from that as well. And all of this is not legalism, beating myself over the head. It's, I would like to live in a world where Sunday was not a day of business. And so I'm going to try and bring that about as much in my own life as I can. So there's that side of it. Since picking this book up, I've taken the last 2 Sundays and left my phone off. I had to send one scheduling text this last Sunday. So again, it's not legalism that I'm sinning by sending one thing. But unplug the phone. I don't wake up and scroll social media like I might normally do. I don't play music or a podcast when I'm getting ready. I don't do any of those things. I don't sit in front of the TV and get on my computer and social media. I've taken that break. I've played games with my kids. I've read, this book, read more Bible. I had more prayer time. Just had a little more conversation time with my wife, things like that. It's been a great blessing. It's something I plan on continuing to do. This is the kind of thing I've talked with her about bringing her in on it. And since just leaving one of our phones on and just letting family members know, hey, if you really need anything from us, call us. Any texts, anything non-urgent, we'll answer it on Monday morning. It's not that hard to do. Both Mondays, I've picked my phone back up on Monday morning when waking up. There were texts, there were some emails, there was nothing urgent that I really needed. Again, people could get a hold of me if there was some urgent thing that needed to happen, and so it's just been a blessing. It's been a breath of fresh air, and what I've found is I log in and realize I didn't miss anything on social media. There were no posts I had to see or anything like that. And so the first week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's easier to stay off of social media because you realize I'm not missing that much. I slowly dragged back into it by the end of the week. this last Sunday, so the second time around. I'm hoping to extend that a little more, that I can get through those first few days and go, you know what, I don't really need to be logged in all the time. I don't need to be notified of everything that goes on, and just check in a couple times a day, lunchtime, evening, whatever it may be, and then unplug. I don't need to be sitting there scrolling social media and reels all the time. And then hopefully, as I get toward the end of the week, kind of looking forward toward that day of rest, it keeps me off as well. But it's a great pattern for the week. I'm enjoying a lot. Again, it's not legalism. Again, and for me, I've taken Sundays. As I said in the book, Charlie Kirk took Saturdays were his day of rest. I believe since I'm already going to worship, I'm already taking that time for dedication, for family, for the church, for all those kinds of things. Just keep it rolling with Sunday, and be a little more connected on Saturday, and then Sunday morning just kind of be able to be unplugged and have my mind totally on worship, nothing on the phone, no football, email, or phone notifications coming in for scores or anything like that. It's been a great blessing. I'm not saying you have to do it. He's not saying you have to do it in the book. This is a very interesting book, as of course, unfortunately, was the last thing he was able to produce in his unfortunately short-lived career, that he accomplished so much. But this is an interesting one for him to go out on. It's not the political conversation that he was always having, but it was a call to take a break, to get ourselves out of the distractions and the rat race and the idol of productivity and all that. I benefited from it a lot. As I said, I'm practicing some of these things in my life. I recommend you do the same. And if you do, leave a comment. I'd like to hear what you think. Just take a day this next weekend, unplug, and not just unplug for unplugging's sake, but you're taking this digital fast, this fast from life, to grow closer to God and to the people around you. So replace the one thing with something else as well. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. Again, nobody's saying anybody has to do this, but it's a breath of fresh air, I would say. So that is my review of Charlie Kirk's Stop in the Name of God. As I said, there will be a link in the comments or in the notes below, whether you're listening to this on podcast or on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, once again, please drop a like and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. My next book review, I don't have it here to hold up, but is Joe Rigney's The Sin of Empathy. Very good book I'm enjoying very much. One I think is critically important for this day and age. So keep an eye out for that, and I will talk to you guys on the next one.